My special guest tonight is Colin. He's a part of the Indie News Network. Colin is joining me for the first story tonight. What's going on, Colin? Thanks so much for squeezing me in.
Oh, you squeezed me in, but appreciate you having me once again.
Awesome. So I do want to go ahead and get started with that Jamaal Bowman story. While I get this up, can you explain to everyone, Colin, like why was Jamaal Bowman there and what was this event about?
So most people do not know this, but in addition to my teaching, so I'm a teacher in DC, I'm also a family education advocate. So I am a volunteer for an education advocate nonprofit in DC as well. So 2 weeks ago, we had our annual end of the year benefit. And Congressman Bowman was scheduled to speak at this event. So I had the opportunity to, obviously meet him very briefly, obviously listen to his speech, which I recorded because I figured that could be content for INN News, and it was. And yeah, so I think just in light of everything that's been happening, I figured, he was going to say something that we could probably talk about, and sure enough, he did.
He did, and I have that video here. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm laughing because I've seen this already, but it's really interesting. So here is Jamaal Bowman's speech at the event that Colin attended. So Colin did record this, and let's go ahead and get right into it.
Thank you so much for the invite. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that warm introduction. Congratulations to all the honorees. Where are the honorees? Raise your hands if you're honoree. Please give them a round of applause. Congratulations. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your love of the work. Because you cannot be an honoree unless you have love, true, deep, real love for the work that you are doing, for the kids that you are serving, for the families that you are serving, and for the communities you are serving. When teachers talk about love, and when activists in education talk about love, it's not a cliche for us. When people ask us why we're doing this, how is the work going, and they ask questions like that, the core answer is love. When I worked in education for 20 years, I was a teacher, I was a school counselor, I was a middle school principal. I did it for 20 years. I went to work every day. When you're sick, you push through, you do what you got to do, and you do it because you love the work that you do. But you also realize how important that work is to not just transforming the lives of the kids and families that you serve, but transforming the nation into what it is meant to be.
So I'm going to pause there for a second because so far, he's not saying anything that's concerning, right, Colin?
So far, no. And actually, to be, and I'm sure that there are parts that I know you're probably going to talk about. Overall, I didn't have a problem with the speech overall. But there were some certain things in the speech that I was like, especially given this was a room full of educators, many of them were of color. He could have gone into stuff a little more in depth than he chose to. And I think he had some reasons as to why he didn't, but we can talk about that later on.
Right.
And what it claims it wants to be, that work, that real work lives in our schools each and every day and lives in our classrooms as a sacred space. So I would not be here in Congress if it wasn't for my time as a teacher. I would not be here in Congress if it wasn't for my time as a school counselor. I don't even know if you know I was a school counselor. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my time as a middle school principal, because when you are in those spaces, all of the issues of society intersect at your doorstep every day, intersect in your classroom every day. When a child is struggling to learn a particular topic or content or reading or whatever it is, you know that that is connected to something in their family, community, society, etc. It's also connected to historical discrimination. And we have to be honest and tell that real story. there's a reason why we have an achievement gap that's rooted more in economics than it is in race. We got to talk about the economic issues there and the strategic political decision-making that's led to certain communities remaining in poverty while others have not. And we have to talk about how poverty creates complex traumas that lead to some of the learning challenges that our kids face. And unfortunately, not enough educators even know about this. Come on. So when we talk about the school to prison pipeline and not implementing restorative justice, is because we quick to put black and brown kids into special ed before really trying to find out what's going on. So all of that experience, all of that knowledge, if you will, led me to open a school, led me to pursue a doctorate, and led me to run for Congress against a 31-year institution, and I won. I didn't win because of me. I won because of the coalition we had, but because of my training as an educator. So, and an education activist, by the way. So it wasn't about just doing the work in classrooms and in schools. It was about being an activist in the community on the ground. And that's what you all are. So I need for you to continue to be activists, because in order to save our democracy, we need educators at the front of the line.
Okay, I'm gonna pause there for a second. Colin, I want to talk about the comment he just made about we need the activists on the ground, because this is what we've been saying over at RBN multiple times. Here you have someone who's in Congress. They are a member of the squad. They're progressive. And even he is telling you, you have to have the activists on the ground.
Yeah, which aligns with what AOC said to Afeni last year. You have to be the ones to do the work. So basically what he's saying here is absolutely true. Like, we can't just expect politicians just to go into Congress and think that they're going to do the work without us pushing them to do it. Like, and the only way that's going to happen is through direct action. So here he's right. The question is, how has he and others received us in terms of the mobilization and organization that we've been doing on the ground? That's the question.
Yep.
We need educator activists at the front of the line, speaking truth to power. We need you at the local level, at the state level. Sorry, I know DC don't have a state. My bad. We worked on it. I'm an original co-sponsor. We're trying to get it done. But again, isn't that crazy? Like, what? That's crazy. But also, if you don't have consistent engagement and relationships with your member of Congress and the senators, you have to consistently engage them. Because yes, fight locally, but please, you gotta engage Congress. Because Congress has a lot of power to do a lot of things. And in order for, I'll say it this way, I was sworn into office January 3rd. January 6th, there was an insurrection. It was an attack on our nation's capital, the first attack on the capital since the War of 1812. It was done by white nationalists. We just had a horrific massacre in Buffalo, New York, facilitated by someone who's following something called the Great Replacement Theory. He literally researched the closest black community, drove 200 miles to slaughter black people. This is what he did. Tens of millions are being radicalized every day online because they think Trump is the official president and they think the Great Replacement Theory is real. So we may see more of what happened in Buffalo across the country. And we see mass shootings every day. And speaking just briefly about the Great Replacement Theory, how many of you know about eugenics? Raise your hand if you know about eugenics. Many of you do. And as we know, when slavery ended in this country, it ended in terms of chattel slavery. There are other forms of oppression and slavery that persisted in our society. Jim Crow is one, eugenics is another. The systemic degradation of the black race via sterilization, but also via standardized testing and how they're designed. There's a direct line from the eugenics movement, sterilization, the creation of standardized tests, and what they've been used for.
Yes.
And it connects directly today to the Great Replacement theory. The bottom line is the white race is king, everybody else, get out of here. So our fight, and if you don't believe our fight is rooted in that, who was our previous president? How did he get there? And ask yourself this question: if it weren't for COVID, what if we didn't have COVID? Would he be president again?
No.
Ask yourself, think about that. So, sorry to, tell you all of that, but if we're not honest about who we are, we will never achieve the vision and the ideals of our democracy. We have to be honest with who we are, we have to be honest with how we got here, and then we can create a new vision for where we need to go. And I think that vision includes all of us, a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-economic, multi-religious, multi-gender democracy where everyone can thrive. But we need leaders, and we need help. So there were, and I'll close on this, and sorry for speaking so long. There, throughout American history, we've had the abolitionist movement, the suffrage movement, the LGBTQ movement, many movements throughout history, civil rights movement, and it was those movements that made transformative change. We need another movement right now, and we need people in the streets and on the phones and writing letters and on social and on email and a part of this movement, not for a season, but at least for a decade, and I say for the rest of our lives, because democracy is a contact sport, and if we don't engage and keep it, we will lose it, and we are close to losing it right now. So I need you, we need you, our children need you, and you know it. So I need a national teachers movement, I need a national children's movement, and I need a national parents movement to lead this human rights movement that I think we need right now. So, it's up to y'all to start that movement. So after you have fun tonight, let's get started. And I'm here to support you in any way I can. God bless you, I love you, have a good evening.
Okay, Colin, where do you want to start? Where do you want to begin?
Oh, God, there's a lot. So overall, I mean, he knew his audience. I'll say that. I honestly, and I want to be very fair, there's a lot that I didn't mind him saying. I thought overall it was a good speech. The problem is he started talking about, the issues in education in connection to economics. I wish he would have went deeper into that, because it just kind of seems like he kind of made it seem like the issue, and especially since he brought up the Great Replacement theory and eugenics, he kind of alluded to it in terms of it being like a white winger thing.
Yeah.
And actually last week on INN, I pulled up an article from Harvard that talks about how eugenics started in academia in this country. Harvard being the main culprit in that. So the idea of eugenics is not a white wing thing. You could argue that they were the progressives of their day. that were implementing it and using Congress to further, the idea of eugenics into this country. Same thing with the Great Replacement Theory. I'm actually going to go into that a little bit more tomorrow night, because seeing this, I figured this needed to be spoken about in 2 parts. And I don't want to say too much. Watch the stream tomorrow night. But basically, like, the Great Replacement Theory is tied to capitalism as well. Yep. So you have to wonder, like, is Jamaal Bowman not saying this because he's naive to it? Or is it because he knows that Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden have said very recently, oh, we're capitalists, And so that will kind of infringe upon the very systems that are working in government that would kind of override anything that he would probably say normally had he really been able to kind of say what he wanted to say. So exactly. I just wished he would have gone a lot deeper, especially given that we're talking about, in schools, critical race theory and all of this, this is part of the truth that needs to be exposed, that he had the platform to talk about it and he didn't. So that was the issue that I had, that he didn't go into it deep enough to kind of make the connections with people who may not necessarily known as to, and he said himself, we need to know why. We need to figure out the why. And he had the opportunity to say why, and he didn't say it.
Right. Jamaal Bowman is one of the members of the squad that's really not willing to go. He's only willing to go so far. Like I always say, he's the weakest member. He really is. Right. He's the weakest link. And one of the things that was interesting to me that he mentioned in that speech, he's saying that we have to do it. Right. We have to do the work. We have to engage with our congressmen and women.
Right.
So let's talk about engaging with our congressmen and women, because I don't think the problem is that we're not trying to engage with them. They're not trying to engage with us.
Exactly.
And we've seen this happen multiple times, whether it's social media, whether it's writing letters to them, whether it's emailing them, asking them to come on. I've reached out to Rokana, I think twice. And so it's not even so much of us not trying to engage with them. And to prove my point, after he finished this speech, Colin, did he take questions from the audience?
Nope. He took a picture of us as the group and left. So he was only there for 20 minutes. So I have to preface that, because I'm sure people in the chat might be saying, did you have the opportunity to ask any questions? No, I didn't, because he just bounced right after that, pretty much. But I do want to kind of mention something that we also kind of talked about on INN News last week after watching it. Our guest last week, G. Jojo Nice, we both were at the Force to Vote protests last year. So he mentioned as far as, oh, you have to engage Congress. We did. He, I, Fiorella, Jackson, Nico House, Pasta, and many others were there 2 days before the insurrection, walking around the Capitol. Like, some of us were close to getting arrested in the idea of them forcing the vote so that to try to get Medicare for all, like, more in the consciousness, given that we were in the throes of COVID at that time.
Right.
And I know prior to that, there was a virtual town hall, which I know that the squad were invited to. They didn't show up. I also was at the Capitol last summer, and I know a lot of you know this, that I called out AOC and Cori Bush with Franco asking, like, what are you going to do about the 10% of people who may not get benefits from the moratorium, that they're going to get evicted?
Right.
And what did they do? Turn the music on me and Franco.
Yes.
So the time that we have engaged them, we've been ignored. But Jamaal has said, you need to engage us. AOC has said, you need to engage us. And yet when we do, they just dismiss us, because I think in their mind, we're not the right people to engage, because we are part of the working class. So
Which they're supposed to be from too, though.
right. And I know you had Cynthia McKinney on your show not so long ago, and I think it was her who mentioned that for them right now is a matter of generational wealth, because many of the squad members do not come into money, you know.
Right.
So the idea of them being in Congress and kind of prolong as long as they can be there so that they're able to get their benefits, you know, they get their book deals, they get their speaking fees or whatever else, you know, like they're working towards themselves as far as their career to make sure that they get what they need and what their family needs. But they're not necessarily thinking in terms of what we need on the ground. So that was the issue that I had, you know, with Jamaal Bowman. And they say a lot of the right things. And I think a lot of it is that he cannot say a lot of the right things because the Democrats are just as complicit in what the Republicans would naturally do in terms of making the others the fall guys. Yeah, like Democrats may say, oh, we support you. We support Black people. We support people of color. We support the LGBT community. We support, you know, the people that Republicans generally kind of say, oh, these people are the fault of why this country is so bad.
Yeah.
But both parties are tied to the same money and the same donors. So it makes the Democrats look weak because they are complicit essentially in the fact that both they and the Republicans take the same money from the same corporations. So they really have no room to really say the fullness of what they should be saying if they really wanted to be for the people, to call out the Republicans and say, look, this is all tied to capitalism. And you guys are taking corporate money, you know, but they do the same thing. So they can't say that.
Right. Exactly. One of the things I want to point out for people who may not be aware in reference to what Colin was talking about, there was a lot of action last year at the Capitol. Afeni, Colin, Franco, Max Blumenthal, all of them, they're in that DC area, right? So they went to those actions, tried to talk to members of the squad. I know Afeni actually got to talk to AOC on, I guess, one-on-one because Afeni didn't have a camera. She wasn't filming. So AOC, I guess, felt more comfortable talking to her. But what AOC said to Afeni was that if you guys want them to do anything in here, you have to organize on the outside. That's the only way. And this came from AOC. That's the only way they're going to do anything. You have to put pressure on them. Now, why is that a problem? The problem is this was around the same time, or actually a little bit after the marches for Medicare for All. Every single one of them were contacted. I know for a fact, I was with the Boston March for Medicare for All here with organizer Kyle. I was the MC here. And I can tell you, all the representatives here in Massachusetts, they were contacted. And that includes Miss Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey. And their offices confirmed that they got the message and that they would let them know. That includes Ayanna Pressley. So they did not respond. They knew it was happening. AOC knew those marches were happening. Bernie Sanders knew. All of them knew. And they didn't even tweet about it.
And I will say, because I wasn't at all the organizational meetings, but I was at some of them. So I knew some of the work that was going on behind the scenes. And I was helping to kind of get everything set up for the DC rally here last year. Cori Bush showed up, you know, to ours. And when we asked her about it, she just said like, oh, I just saw it posted like on Twitter, which wasn't true because it was being suppressed. So she knew about it because she had heard about it prior to, because the organizers reached out to every single squad member, you know? So I guess she felt guilty, you know, so she made the appearance, but she lied and essentially said that she just heard about it that day when that wasn't true.
You have to understand, they were contacted months prior. Like they knew about it months beforehand. So that's why some of us on the organizing side, that's why we were so angry when AOC chose to go help Nina Turner get elected that same day that we had the marches for Medicare for all, because they knew about that date months prior.
Right.
So that's why this is, now you guys are hearing this information, but I'm just saying that, like, for people who didn't understand why we were so upset, that's why we were so upset, because they knew about it far in advance. And so for them to physically, especially the ones who were already in DC, for them to not even make an appearance or even like tweet about it, it's appalling. Bernie Sanders, this is your movement. You are the one who brought Medicare for all to the forefront. He couldn't even tweet about it.
Right.
Because it wasn't being done through electoral politics. It wasn't being done through a campaign. So Jamaal Bowman's speech, when he sits here and he talks about, you know, how we need to engage with our congressmen and women, we are trying to engage with them. We've been trying to engage with them. Jamaal Bowman is not telling that audience that it's his side that is not doing their part. They're the ones that are not speaking to their constituents. They're the ones that are not answering to them. And they're choosing to ignore independent media as well, when it was independent media that really gave them the platform and let everybody know who they were to begin with.
Right. And one other thing that I talked about on INN News last week, this was a story that we covered. You know, Jamaal Bowman is talking about like great replacement theory and eugenics and all this stuff. Not to say there's an issue with any of those things, but I'm sure some of you may not necessarily know this, but right now in the country, schools are offering universal school lunch due to the pandemic. There's a waiver for that right this year. That waiver expires next week.
Yep.
You know, now, Jamaal Bowman, you're a teacher, right? Surely you could be talking about this, you know, as far as making sure that now, you know, like the school lunches are not that good. But, you know, but what will happen if that waiver expires? It goes back to the means tested way of, if you make this much money, then you can get a free lunch. If you make this certain amount of money, then you have to. So just more the bureaucracy of having the working class fill out paperwork to ensure that their children eat at school. And then, like, I know a lot of you, probably some of you know this, that schools are allowed to take, like, if you don't pay, like, you essentially have to make a credit that if you don't pay for your school lunch, then essentially you're not allowed to come to school. Yep. So this is an issue that Jamaal Bowman, you know, that's an easy thing, like, that you should be advocating for, or anyone in the squad should be advocating for. But instead, you're talking about great replacement theory and eugenics, and again, within the means of a right-wing talking point, when the issue with both of those things have to do with the elite class, especially regarding eugenics, and then economics in terms of the great replacement theory. And as I said, I'm not going to talk more about it. You have to watch tomorrow night to see who will. But yeah, he mentioned it in his speech, but he didn't go all the way. And so I really would have appreciated, like, if he did, but it makes sense why he didn't, because that will become too close to in regards to what the party that he's in represents. And I'm sure they wouldn't want him talking about it in the fullness that he could have had.
Exactly. And I think I'm actually going to pull up that clip. If you give me just a second, I'll go ahead and fast forward to that. But I also want to show, I want to show you guys this reaction, because this was kind of funny.
Oh, thoughts, boys and girls.
Where do we begin? Oh my goodness. Jeez. Mike. What?
Oh.
Colin, you're a better man than me for sitting through 9.5 minutes of that. I swear. we're gonna pick this apart like Thanksgiving turkey. Seriously.
Please do. Please do.
Oh my Lord. I mean, the one when I went like about 6.5, 7 minutes in, when he says Congress has the power to do a lot of things. Yeah, it's words, not mine. Okay, Colin, you remember where you and I and about 35 of us were on January 4th and January 3rd of 2021. We were.
And that's when he gets into the part that Colin mentioned earlier, how you guys were there for Force the Vote. So I do have that. Oh, I forgot to get out of this. I found that video. So I'm going to share that scene where Max Blumenthal asked her that question, because this was like months ago, and there's new viewers since then. So I do want to show you guys what we were talking about, because this is another example where here we are trying to engage with them. And I'm going to show you what she does. Excuse the lighting. This was back in the day. Let me go ahead and I'm going to mute my mic because I'll get an echo. Make sure my volume is up.
That's where we are. And I heard, like, last night there was a lot less people. It's great to see so many more people, but I heard there was an intense debate about the role of the squad and why the squad didn't leverage its vote for the speaker for Medicare for All vote, and why the squad, I mean, with the margin so narrow in Congress, why the squad didn't
because
leverage its vote on the stimulus to get a $15 minimum wage. What?
No. So first, one thing that was said last night, which is something that's very true, and I wish we would have talked about that this was where your conversation was going, because we're talking about the rally for tonight. And I really would love to keep the conversation on what's happening.
I feel like it's all related to healthcare and the.
It absolutely is, but this is the thing. What was said last night is that this bill, Medicare for All, is not. No, there's no person on the squad whose bill that is. That is Bernie Sanders' bill in the Senate. It is Pramila Jayapal's bill in the House. It is not our bill. We cannot make that bill come to the floor. There is nothing that we can do legally to get the bill to the floor. We have.
But Pelosi could have brought the bill to the floor.
We're good here. Thank you.
What? Well,
I'm sorry, man. We're fine at this.
Why can't she answer the question?
We're here to talk about the eviction.
But I feel like it's all about healthcare.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate your
We're
time.
here for a reason. It's about the moratorium.
Well, why is that? I can't ask about Medicare for All.
The Congresswoman has slept 1 hour. She's done a lot of labor.
I'm trying to get people out here too.
I respect your work.
I'm trying to do the same thing you all are doing.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here.
But why can't she could just answer it and then I go away? I'm not trying to like attack her or anything. I'm not trying to smear her.
We're happy to give you a contact and you can reach
But
out.
why is that issue, the Medicare for All vote, so like she was wrapping up
I'm not
her?
having this conversation.
But she was wrapping up her. I know she was
I'm
wrapping up her answer. Then I was going to say thank you. Everybody come out.
I appreciate
But why
that.
didn't you let her just wrap up her
I
answer?
really appreciate you. We're happy to give you a contact. You can feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks.
That's what happens when we engage them. That's what happens. You see, she was totally for the conversation until it went to something that she didn't really want to talk about, which she should talk about, because she ran on it. All of them ran on Medicare for All. And you see what happens? You see how they walk away? AOC ran away from Franco when he was there to ask her the same questions. Like, it's just, this is what happens. So Jamaal Bowman's response in that speech telling people you need to engage with your congressmen and congresswomen. The problem is not us. The problem is them. They don't want to answer any tough questions, anything that's going to put them outside of their comfort zone, and they need to be held accountable. So it's just, this is the problem. Oh, I think you're muted, Colin. Sorry. Oh, there you go.
Oh, so yeah, I think that just makes it frustrating for us because, you know, especially people online who are kind of like, oh, like you're causing trouble. We're supposed to, you know, because that's the only way that we're going to get anything done. If we're not going to get anything done by being nice. And I know certain content creators say that we have to be nice to our politicians, you know, but right now it's like we're in desperate times right now. So it's like being nice is kind of out of the door, but you know, so it's just like, and being nice has not gotten us anything. So we need to be angry, but they don't respond to that either. So I think that's for us, because kind of like the catch-22 that we get is like politicians say, oh, we need to engage them, we need to engage them. And even Jamaal was saying like, yes, do what you can on the local level, but you also need to be concerned about the federal as well. I thought that was a little interesting because, like we don't necessarily hear that, like it's usually either one or the other. And then Jamal's like, no, you have to do both. But when we have done both, or especially on the federal level, like we're dismissed. So, but yeah, I just figured, as I said, I wanted to record this because I figured it would be content. But I think it's good to kind of see like their rhetoric does not match their actions. And I think especially for him being a part of the squad, like he really doesn't have the room to say all these things, considering that, like he hasn't really been active with us to ensure that any of these things that we want get passed. And like I said, he has the opportunity to make sure children are getting fed next year. And given inflation, the thing with that is right now they're getting a little more than they usually do, which has helped, especially with inflation, so that, certain schools may have to go outside, like having to go to other places to ensure they get the food that they need. If the waivers are cut, then like students will get less of an allowance for food a day. And given, food is up right now. So, so a lot of school districts are going to be struggling as far as how to feed kids. And that's something that Jamaal, as a teacher, should be calling out.
No, he was trying to focus on passing legislation around hip hop. Like when I tell you, I'm not kidding. When I tell you,
you're not kidding. And actually, no. I'm actually going to post that clip because we talked about that in the stream last night. I'm actually going to post that up later on Twitter. So those of you who follow me, you can catch that. But no, like Jamaal Bowman basically put in legislation to make like a hip hop month or some type of bullshit. And it's like, what? Like, this is the kind of mess that you're running for, So, I mean,
crazy.
Overall, he said a lot of the right things for the audience that he was with, but I wish he would have gone a little deeper into some of the stuff that he was saying and not make the implication that it's all about Trump, it's all about the right wing. There's a lot that his party has also caused that, or at least complicit in, that he didn't mention. But on the other hand, he gave me content to talk about it. So I gotta thank him for that at least.
That's true. Zeneb said Paula and I messaged Corey. Yeah, like they knew. Like it's embarrassing. Ashura, thank you for the super chat. Kyle and Crystal were in DC, no tweets or marches. But you know why, Ashura? Because Bernie Sanders and the squad didn't support the marches. This is the pattern that I have noticed. In order to get, especially the larger commentators, with the exception of Jimmy Dore, because Jimmy Dore was at the Medicare for All marches. With the exception of him, a lot of the larger platforms, they do not support these actions. They do not talk about these actions. I think Kyle did mention it on his show. Breaking Point sure as hell didn't. They don't talk about these actions unless it is backed by the squad or the Justice Democrats that are there in Congress. Anything else? No, they don't want to hear. And that goes to show you what's really happening here. Right. This is why we really haven't gotten anywhere, because people are so focused on that inside Democrat Party game, which has not really benefited any of us at all.
And you know what? Can I mention something, because this has been pissing me off a lot, because I'm seeing this a lot on Twitter, just as far as, oh, Jimmy Dore doesn't do this, Jimmy Dore doesn't do that, Jimmy Dore does this or whatever. Look, I'm not making the case for Jimmy Dore or anything like that, but what I will say is you shouldn't expect Jimmy Dore or any one of the big commentators to really do the work as far as organizing. That's not his role. You know, that's why I think you and people like RBN and us and INN, that's our job. You know, like our job is to kind of help to organize on the ground. We shouldn't expect Jimmy to do all of that, but people are putting him on a pedestal and saying, oh, like he should be doing this, he should be doing that. Well, it's like, why aren't you doing it? You know? So I just get mad that like all this hate, you know, like, and again, Jimmy has his faults. We all do. But
Right.
at least he has used his platform when it's necessary to highlight some of these issues and many of the bigger ones too. So we have to give him props for that at least. But really the work, as Jamal's saying, should come from us. We should be the ones that should be doing the work, you know, not putting it all on your favorite podcaster or the ones that you hate, you know, like, oh, you should be doing a lot more. Like, if you want to organize the ways that you can, and I think we kind of do a decent job in trying to let people know how they can get involved in all that. But, you know, but don't put all that focus on one person just because you may like them or you may dislike them for whatever reason and put them on the spot and being like, you should be doing this or whatever. Like, that's, and the other thing is not everyone is meant to organize. Jimmy's not an organizer. So,
yeah. Well, I will say this, you know, we're not expecting them to go out and organize, but I personally am expecting them to at least cover it or to at least mention it.
Right.
And I think that's where the disappointment comes in, because had all of the large networks covered the marches for Medicare for All, we would have had more people at those marches.
Right. And to be fair to Jimmy, and again, no matter what people say, he did talk about it. He did have the organizers on his show. He did went and speak, you know. That's more than what we could say for like some of the other bigger channels. And I'm not going to mention them by name, but we know who they are. So, and I know you've said this on your show, like if these bigger channels were even to mention it once, you know, that could have had a massive effect, you know, but they don't want the working class involved. You know, they only want the people, the organizations that are in their circles to be involved, you know. And again, you guys are smart. You guys know who those organizations are. But yeah, we should be doing the work, you know, not them, you know. But I think a lot of us gone into this in part of we haven't want to do this as far as an organization arm too, where some of the larger channels may not necessarily, and again, no fault for them, but you know, don't put all essentially your hope or your frustration on one person or several people that you may like or hate because you feel like they should be doing more. That really should be up to us. And, you know, we try and do our part to make sure that we let people know when people are organizing, that we try and have, you know, our audience know like how they can get involved, you know. So, but yeah, I'm just going to leave it right there. But I just wanted to say that because I've been seeing that a lot. And I think it's really unnecessary when this is the very thing that we should be like coming together and trying to figure out like how can we have some of these policies that we want. Like you had Savage Joy and Andre for Medicare for All yesterday, and we talked off camera briefly, you know, like both need to happen as far as federal and local, you know, and if we do what we can within the local level, that's going to swell up to the federal level. So both are needed, you know, in order to have people rally behind the idea, because right now we're not even talking about Medicare for All, and last I checked, we're still in the pandemic.
Right. Well, the smaller channels are talking about it still, you know, often. I will say this also too. Thank you for this, Andrew, for the super chat. Kyle did mention the first Medicare for All. Yes. Yeah, I mentioned that. Crystal didn't, which I noticed a lot with these two. Kyle will say something and say Crystal agrees with him. Oh, that's a good point. But I mean, my thing is this, yes, he did mention it, you know, kudos for that, but he also mentioned it last minute. And I say this as someone, again, who was in those meetings with some of the organizers. Those people were reached out to way in advance to talk about it on their show, to bring Joy on, to bring other people on, any organizer that was involved with it, to bring them on the show. And so kudos that he did mention it, but it was literally last minute.
And just more, and kind of flippant in a sense. Like he just said it like, oh, this is happening. And he didn't even know all the details.
No,
so
he
it's
didn't
just kind of like,
details.
I heard about this thing that's happening. This is a good thing. You guys should go. And it was like, no, like that's not going to help anybody, you know, and especially since Kyle lives in New York, there was a march in New York. If he really wanted to, he could have gone, you know, especially given what happened within his home family. You would think that he'd have a personal stake at this.
Right.
But he didn't. So
I just want to add, too, it's important for people to know Susan Sarandon was at the march in New York City.
Right.
So it's like, this is the thing, like, you don't just pull something off of Twitter, and I can tell that's probably what happened. You don't just pull something off of Twitter and say, hey, there's like these marches going on for Medicare for all, like all these different cities. Oh, wow. I don't know who organized this. I don't know who's in charge of this. No, that's poor journalism. And I don't believe that, because like I said, all of those people were contacted multiple times. The organizer information was, if you didn't know who they were, there was the Medicare for All tweet group on Twitter. All you had to do was click on the Medicare for All, just little, you know, profile pic, and you would have been able to see who was who. But to not even go that far, like that just kind of said something to me. That felt lazy. Like, I'm sorry, but
yeah. So
it felt lazy.
Yeah, but I think, like I said, I think it's just more work for us, but we have to be the ones to kind of put the message out there, just as far as, you know, organizing and direct action and mutual aid and all these other practices to try and ensure to get people what they need right now, but also to try and build the idea of, you know, like, these are issues that we need, and we need to be in solidarity with one another, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, as you say all the time, this is a matter of class, you know. So if we're able to have connections with people who are not look like us, or maybe ideologically or politically, you know, may not think or believe in the same things, but if we are able to come together on certain issues, then that's great. But that friends the establishment, because they benefit off of us fighting among another. And in a lot of ways, I think that's what the larger channels are doing, you know, making all these, picking fights among, like, oh, this person said this, or this person said that, when they could be using their platforms to be like, we need to organize, we need to work together. And I'm not seeing a lot. I think generally we do a good job at that, but I'm not seeing it necessarily from the larger channels. Like, they just get into like the drama of it all, like with this person or that person, you know, and not really expressing the true issues that are really tied to us, you know, for people who are among the working class.
Right. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I do want to address something really quick from Zena. I don't even like Crystal, but it's no wonder she ignores us, because instead of reaching out, we spend so much time trying to expose her because she believes in electoralism. No. Those people, as Colin here with me, as someone else in this space, those people have been contacted multiple times. This is going all the way back over a year ago. So don't think that just because you don't hear them talk about something, or you don't see them on our platform, or you don't see them at a direct action event or mention it, that doesn't mean they haven't been contacted. Again, I told you this is a class issue.
Right.
And that's all faces.
And to speak of Crystal, she knew about Force the Vote.
Right.
So she knew about that, but she didn't know about the marches after that. Doesn't make much sense to me, especially since Kyle knew about it again last minute. Like, and if he knew about it, why couldn't Crystal and Saga talk about it on their show?
Right.
In fact, actually, Ryan Grimm knew about it
Yep.
because he talked about it and smeared it. So, you know, so it's not a big club, guys. Like a lot of the larger channels, they know each other. You know, like they probably have each other's, probably not so much anymore. But like once upon a time, they have each other's phone numbers, I'm pretty sure. So they
Yeah.
know all this information that's coming in and they talk to each other. So it's not impossible to think that they don't know what's happening or what's being talked about in the space. They know, but they choose not to because it affects their brand or their donors, depending depending which is which. But
right. They have DM groups just like we have DM groups. They know what's going on. They pick and choose what they want to go to, and if they feel that in any way it's going to cause their audience to give them a side eye, then they won't mention it. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it is a class divide.
Right.
But I do want to say also, Colin, because I do want to get into the next story, but this is coming from Jonathan. He has a good point here. Just in case you didn't know, New York City public schools are slated to lose $215 million from their budget, yet Jamaal said nothing about that.
Exactly. And like one thing that I do, locally, just as far as my advocacy program is to try uplift the issues that teachers have in the DC area and uplift them to our local government officials. That's my job essentially, is to bring the attention of things that they may not necessarily hear from teachers who are actually doing the work. So I'm actually essentially being like the advocate as far as these are issues that teachers and families and students are talking about. You need to do something about it. That's my job. Keep in mind, I don't get paid to do that. Like I volunteer to do that. Jamaal gets paid to be aware of what's happening within his community and in his district. And the fact that he's not even mentioning anything about this as a teacher, it's disappointing. Like that should be an easy thing, and people can easily rally around something like that, especially right now.
I just think that teachers are just incredibly taken for granted in this country. There's a lot of things that teachers do that they're not paid for, that people just don't see. You don't see unless you're in education.
Right. And teachers are leaving, well, you're an educator, you just left and actually and I'll say this now, I'm actually thinking of leaving the profession next year. Like I'm just thinking out my escape plan of how to get out. And I don't want to, because I love being in the classroom. I love working with my students. But given the pandemic, well, the issues were already there, but the pandemic has heightened a lot of those issues. And we're doing twice the work or expected to, we're back to normal now, do the same work. And we're screaming, we can't. It is not normal. Children are still getting sick. Teachers are still getting sick. And we have to kind of juggle all of that in the midst of our own teaching. And so teachers are being asked to do way above and beyond what I think is normal. And teachers, I think, fortunately, are having a backbone and saying, we don't if this is what it means to really sacrifice literally your body in order to do the work, we're not doing it anymore. And personally, that's where I'm at right now. It's like, I love my students, but I love me more. And if I'm going to essentially have a nervous breakdown at my job in the name of having a job, then I'd rather not do it.
Right. Eric Gray, I'm thinking about an escape plan from education myself, Colin and Sabby. Yeah, I left and never looked back. Yeah. Jonathan, I plan on leaving next year, Colin. Yeah.
But you know what, though? Here's the thing, and that's the other thing I'll just mention kind of quickly. Like, there's more to why I'm leaving, but the other part is, I think especially being in this space and knowing what I know, especially, working in INN and how it relates to education. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it.
No.
And for me, it's like, I feel like I'm complicit in the mess. It's just as far as the educational bureaucracy in this country that I feel like I'm being complicit too. And so a lot of that for me is like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like,
Yep.
I fought like when I was like 18, when I decided to be a teacher, I knew it was hard, but I was like, if I just worked in my classroom and do what I needed to do, then I'll make a difference that way, and that will be okay. And I think especially now becoming a little more aware of how things politically work, especially in the education system. I hate saying this, but unless there's like a revolution in terms of how children are educated, and we're not even educating children the right way, in my opinion. We're educating children to essentially be slaves to capitalism, not to push like the narrative to try to make things better for themselves. Like, we're not teaching our children to be able to be revolutionaries, we're training them essentially to be cogs in a machine. And I don't want to do that. And I feel like right now, if I want to be in education, if I want to push for that, I have to do that from the outside versus and not doing it from inside in. Case in point, like the squad, they thought, if we just do what we need to do, then things will change. And look at what's happening to them. So kind of taking a lesson from that for myself is like, I'd rather get out. But if I'm going to fight for education, it'll be a lot easier if I'm outside of it versus being inside and being like pushed down by that system. So
well said. Thanks so much, Colin. I'm going to get into the next story, but Colin, before you go, where can people find you? Because I saw people asking because they want to see your part 2, definitely, of that Jamaal Bowman.
Yeah. So if you go to Indie News Network, INN, you could find me there. I generally am on there with Reef Freeland, my co-host, every Wednesday at usually around 9 Eastern Standard Time. I also have my personal channel, Kamal Mukwana, which is more specific to issues related to Africa and how that translates to people within the diaspora. I haven't done a lot on that channel, honestly, because I've been so committed to like INN, but I hope, over the summer, as I have some time off, I'm able to get at least a couple of things on content within my personal channel as well. And then you can also mostly, I'm very active on Twitter. So if you find me on Twitter at Obona_Colin, you can find me there and rant and rave. All that to say, one thing we're trying to do in INN News is like, obviously we want to try and cover some of the major stories, but one thing that we want to do more, especially as we're growing, is to cover stories that are not necessarily talked about. So I'm just saying to you guys in the chat, like any stories that you feel like we should be talking about more, especially in this space. If you follow me on Twitter, DM me, and let me know of what stories that you think that should be covered. And then we could potentially have you on as a guest to talk about it. We've done it before, or we can just report on those stories as well. So we want to try and get a little more variety just in the stories, just so we're not all talking about the same thing, but also to just kind of see how things are working like throughout the country and around the world in terms of issues within the working class that people are needing to know that you may not necessarily know about on the larger channels as well. So let me know, DM me if there are stories like that that should be covered.
Awesome. Colin, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Sabby.
Bye.
Have a good night.